So welcome back to the Insights podcast by the UNSW Law Society. We're your hosts for this episode, Will and Adrika.
Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging.
So this episode today is sponsored by Criminal Defence Lawyers Australia, an award-winning, highly specialised team of criminal lawyers who work hard to ensure favourable outcomes for their clients across all Australian courts.
Today we are very excited to have with us Jimmy Singh, Principal Lawyer at Criminal Defence Lawyers Australia, located in the Sydney CBD near the Dining Centre Court building. Jimmy is an experienced criminal defence lawyer with over 16 years of experience exclusively in criminal law. He has represented thousands of clients over his career, from drink driving to commercial drugs, sexual assault and murder cases. His dedication to justice is reflected not just in his court results, but also in his efforts to mentor and provide career development and advancement opportunities to the next generation of lawyers looking to pursue a career in criminal law.
So in today's episode, we'll be talking with Jimmy to unpack the different career paths within criminal law, from prosecution to defence, and explore how the digital age and emergence of AI is reshaping the field. We'll also reflect on Jimmy's journey from law student to seasoned trial lawyer, drawing practical insights for aspiring legal professionals in criminal law.
Yep, so welcome Jimmy. As we do with all of our podcast guests, we really like to get to know you as a person before we get into the more complex legal side of things. So I just have a few fun questions for you. The first being, if you could have dinner with any legal figure, whether that's fictional or a real person, who would it be and why?
It's a really difficult one because there's so many awesome, great legal figures out there. Look, I'll probably just say Justice Kirby. I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
I think he's got a very different perspective at looking at things. Makes him very unique. As you know, he's usually the dissenting judge. So yeah, Justice Kirby.
Yeah.
We're a big fan of Justice Kirby at UNSW.
Yeah.
So.
That's a good answer, the great dissenter. So next question, what would you say is the most surprising skill that you've used in a courtroom that isn't necessarily taught in law school?
Communication. It's the most fundamental skill you need to learn to be a great lawyer. Actually, just to be a lawyer as a fundamental. But communication is something you don't learn at law school. You don't learn at high school, you don't learn at primary school, you don't learn anywhere, but you end up having to learn it when you start working in a law firm. I think it applies to any firm, it doesn't have to be a law firm, but communication is a huge, fundamental, very important aspect or a skill to be able to have and master.
And our last little question is, what is your go-to coffee order before a big case? So you're drinking one right now.
Piccolo.
So a piccolo?
Piccolo one sugar.
Oh, okay.
All the time.
Are there good places nearby?
There are. I've explored everywhere. I know where to go. And sometimes they change as well. But yeah, my favourite is a piccolo. I usually have it with one sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'll end up having probably maximum of 3 a day. Minimum of at least 1 a day.
Right,
So
okay.
one in the morning when I start doing some work, and midday time, like around now, and then maybe a little later, soon after that, and that's it. I'll try to cut it off at 3.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise I won't be able to sleep.
No, that's fair enough.
That's a smart way of doing
Small
it.
way, yeah. So I'm also a big fan of piccolos, so
Yeah.
I can get behind that as well. So thanks for those icebreakers. We'll kind of move now into a bit about your professional experience and how you ended up in criminal law as well. So the first question that I wanted to ask you was, what actually initially drew you to criminal law as opposed to other areas of the law? And kind of to add on to that as well, why defence rather than prosecution law as well?
Well, look, first I'll go backwards. First, why defence as opposed to prosecution? Because I think, and especially given my experience now of being in defence for my whole career, is that you have to learn what the prosecution learned as a defence lawyer. You have to know. So you have to kind of be a step ahead of them when you approach cases, and you have to think like they do when you read a brief. So you have to learn what they know. Guidelines, all that kind of stuff, you have to know it. But as a prosecutor, you're more restricted in how you advocate in court. You're more restricted in a lot of things, in even communication. We have to, as a defence, deal with the accused or the defendant, and often their family members as well that are dependent on the accused. That is where I was talking about earlier about communication. We need to know how to be able to effectively communicate with relevant parties at an adequate frequency and at a good quality. You don't just listen to them and kind of not be present when you talk. You need to be present when you talk, because a human being can feel that. They can feel your energy, and it's very important. So that's communication. The prosecution do have to communicate with relevant parties such as complainants or alleged victim and or witnesses, but the frequency and the kind of communication they're required to do is very different, and that's more streamlined in accordance with what they have to do in terms of there's legislation and regulations on what they have to do in certain situations. Whereas as the defendant, we have to talk about the elements of the offence, the maximum penalties, the timeline on which the case is going to go on for. We're a private law firm, we're not legal aid. We do legal aid matters as well, but predominantly our matters are privately funded. So we also have to know how to quote clients adequately and give them a cost disclosure. We have to make sure that if there's any updates in their case that changes that quote, we give it in a timely manner. These things are all part and parcel of communication. And that's something, that it always comes back to that issue of communication. So that's why defence, because you have to know what you have to know as a prosecutor anyway, right? And the other question was, why did I go into criminal law? I find criminal law the most interesting area of law because it involves justice. It involves helping people, making a difference in people's lives, making a difference in not only your client's life, whether they plead guilty or whether they plead not guilty, you're still making a huge difference in their life. But also you're making a big difference in their dependents as well. They may have kids, they have partners, or they have dependents, and you're making a difference in not just one person's life by the quality of your legal representation and advice, but also their dependents. So you're actually helping a lot of people, and you don't see it initially when you start practicing as a lawyer, but as you do, you'll start seeing it, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that notice that you're helping not just one individual but a greater number of people is something that quite a lot of people overlook, I think, when they look at criminal law initially. But something I'm interested about is that distinction between prosecutor and defence, and your preference for defence. Is that something that developed naturally? Is that something that were you exposed to either sides before you decided?
No, I wasn't. I realised it naturally as I was working in defence, because that's what I've always worked in. Because when you prepare a case, you have to know what the prosecution know. And they have to produce all the material, they have disclosure obligations that they have to comply with. We get it, and then we have to review it. We have to also consider whether they've complied with the prosecution's guidelines, their disclosure obligations, whether the police officers done what they acted within their power. Because if they haven't, then we can run what we would call legal arguments to seek the exclusion of evidence. And if I don't know what subject it might be at UNSW, but sections like Section 138 of the Evidence Act, where there's a discretionary exclusionary provisions for the court to consider kicking out evidence effectively, and that could result in acquittals. And the reason that's there isn't just to get people off the hook by technicality only. It's there to protect people's rights, because that's the balancing act there in determining whether evidence gets excluded. It's a balancing act.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the way you talk about it in terms of almost like a chess match and understanding what the prosecution has to do is something that I'm sure a lot of students would find quite appealing as well.
Oh, it's fun. The other reason I love criminal law is advocacy. It's just, there's never a boring day in the office, I'll tell you that. There could be tomorrow morning, there could be a fresh custody bail application, and that happens quite often. Any one of our lawyers here might have to go to a random court, could be Penrith Court, Blacktown Court, Newcastle Court, Wollongong Court, and do a fresh custody bail application where an accused person just recently been arrested and refused bail by the police. And they have to, as soon as the police have arrested you, they have to take you before an authorised officer, which is a court usually, to be dealt with according to law, unless they want to investigate them by questioning them via detaining them. After detaining them, they have to obviously either let them go or grant them bail, don't grant them bail. And then that's where we have to go to court, do a fresh custody bail application on the spot. And that's on the fly. You just have to go, for a law graduate who just started, that's really interesting in criminal law.
Of course.
It's your blood would rush pretty much away from your brain, because you'll be like kind of scared shitless. But you would be, and that's normal because that's how I felt. And it's actually a rush that's quite addictive.
Yeah. That's a great way, I think, to develop your skills though, because you're doing it on the spot. I think that's one of the best ways to learn. And you're not put in the deep end where it's so deep you're going to drown. You have support. Like here, there's a lot of support. I'm available. I'll go through the matter with a lawyer that is doing it for the first time, for example. I'll give them a bit of a heads up, and I'll also be able to gauge whether they're capable of being able to do this particular type of matter as well. So you're given a lot of guidance, but it is important to go to allow yourself to be put outside the comfort zone. If you don't allow yourself to be put outside the comfort zone, you're never going to actually grow and develop as a human being, let alone in your career. And that's very important to be able to do. You need to have enough heart to be able to put yourself outside that comfort zone and allow yourself to be scared.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think what you're talking about with advocacy, I've heard that a lot of barristers or people that go to the court have that same rush as well, and that's what draws them in.
It's the best feeling.
Yeah.
It's the best feeling. The worst feeling is leading up to it. You're scared and you're nervous and you're anxious. I used to not eat. I was very anxious. I wouldn't eat. I couldn't eat. I couldn't have breakfast. Even if I tried to have some Weet-Bix, I'd feel like vomiting. That's how stressed I was and anxious I was leading up to my sentence or hearing back in the days. And then slowly you start gaining more confidence in yourself and relying on your preparation, and you get better at it. You still feel anxious. Like if I do a hearing tomorrow or sentence, I'll still feel anxious because I care. But the experience and the confidence from the experience kicks in, and that happens over time.
Yeah, well, speaking on that, we'd actually love to know a lot more about, I guess, your journey to becoming principal, especially here. Are there any sort of personal highlights that you've had here, any milestones that you think have been really memorable for you in that journey?
Look, I always wanted to do my own trial in the district court. I did a judge alone trial. I wanted to get that under my belt. And then, this was when I was working in another criminal law firm prior to commencing this practice, CDLA. So I wanted to do that, and I did. And we not only did a judge alone trial, but it was also more complicated by reason of you might be aware of the McNaughton defence, which is the mental health defence. Now it's legislated. There's a legislative framework for it in the district court proceedings. But back then, there wasn't. It was all common law. And so my client had effectively woken up next to his, 10-year-old daughter in a manic psychotic episode that he believed he needed to sacrifice the one thing he loved. And so he woke up trying to strangle her to death. Luckily, he snapped out of it in time before that happened. And the police came and they asked him, what happened? He said, I tried to kill my daughter. Because he snapped out of it by that stage. We ended up exploring his medical history. Turns out, not too long before this occurred, his dosage of medication had slightly changed by his new psychiatrist. He was on the same dosage prior to that for pretty much the majority of his life. And that was the tweak that needed to be fixed. And we addressed that. We got a really good psychiatrist, gave evidence. The court accepted it, and my client was acquitted or discharged as a forensic patient, but he still remains in the community because he's stable now. And there was a risk assessment done to confirm that as well before the court made that determination. So that was a trial that I did myself without instructing a barrister. And that was pretty cool.
That does sound amazing, and the good outcome for the client, I guess, in
Great
the
outcome
circumstances.
for the
Yeah.
client, for him, he's back on track with the right medication,
That's great.
treatment. He's with his daughter, his wife. They're happy. There's no issues.
That's great. Yeah.
For sure, and that's kind of what you're talking about with real community impact and being able to see that as well.
Absolutely.
I wanted to kind of delve into a bit about your kind of early career and how you got into, I guess, criminal law, and also for our students watching, how they could get into that pathway as well. So
Yeah.
we're just curious, how did you break into criminal defense? Did you have any internships? What were the opportunities like for you?
I had applied countless jobs. I should have started during my studies at university, but I didn't. I did it after I graduated, effectively, and it was very hard to get a job. I couldn't get a job. Actually, I started working, I did my PLT in a large criminal law firm at the beginning. That was voluntary, it was free. Then I asked to stay on in that position, and they allowed me to, voluntarily. To me, I was living home with mum and dad, so I can afford it. It's okay for me. To me, it's an investment in myself, so I did it. And I worked for free. I passed my PLT requirements. And then I applied for after countless times being rejected in other law firms, I applied for another criminal law firm, a smaller one, that only did crime. And I got the offer, accepted it, and worked there for a couple of years. Then I went back to that other larger criminal law firm. They accepted me there, and I worked there for a few years. And then moved from that firm to another criminal law firm, where I then, after that, in which I then started this practice, CDLA. How did I get into it? I remember going into an interview room in the job I ended up eventually getting, my first paid job in a criminal law firm. And he asked me questions, the principal asked me a number of legal questions. I didn't know the answers to them. But I tried to answer them to the best I could, and the ones I didn't know, I said I didn't know. But then after the interview, I went home, I researched it all, and I emailed the principal saying, by the way, I know I didn't get these right, or I didn't know the answer to it, but I did some research and here's the answer to those questions. That next day he called me and he said, look mate, I'm going to offer you the job. So initiative, don't just give up, keep trying. You see, criminal law for me is a passion, I love it. I knew I loved it back towards the end of my university degree. After doing like some subjects on criminal law, I knew this is exactly what I want to do, because this is heavily advocacy focused, and that's what I want to do. And I wanted that advocacy, and I wanted criminal law because it was interesting. So to me, it was a no other options approach. Criminal law is what I want to do, even if I don't get paid for it for the first couple of years, which is what ended up happening. I was working for free post-admission experience for about a year and a half. Until I then got an opportunity to get paid. And then I worked my way up from there because my passion drove me to where I am. Because I always wanted to learn. I'm not looking at anything other than sticking in my lane and learning what I want. I need to learn to be the best at what I want to do.
I think that's an incredible display of passion there.
Yeah, but the hardest part is finding your passion. And it's okay not to, because not everyone does, and that's quite normal actually. I was lucky, but first, find your passion. Everything else follows. You find a way.
Okay, I think that's some good advice for our students out there as well. You mentioned earlier how obviously you said communication is very important, but it's not something that they really teach at university. But reflecting on your university experiences, was there anything that you had, or any experiences you had at university that you think did actually help you prepare for a career in criminal law? Or were there any moments where you thought, oh, like this is something I learned at uni and this is actually helping me in practice?
I think PLT.
Yeah.
You have to do PLT, practical legal training. That forced me to go into the workforce voluntarily, at least. At least it got me out there looking at law firms and trying to get into criminal law firms. At least that got me to that point, and that pushed me to get there. And that allowed me to then move from that to this effectively. So PLT was very important. For somebody that's not living at home, that's living on their own, paying expenses, doing free voluntary work, even if it's PLT, is tough. And I think that's where there's a gap. that needs to be addressed.
And I think that's very right. That is a gap that definitely exists. And I think that's something that quite a lot of people continue to be a bit worried about. But I think you're right, for those that do have the opportunity to, it's a good chance to really just get your foot in the door and get some first-hand experience.
Yeah, that's probably PLT is the only thing that's really helped, other than the theory part of it. Theory is very different to practice. Extremely different. Like, it's a good base to have that legal knowledge where you can start applying it, but it's still very different. Just even the way you think of cases when you read a brief of evidence, you have to I mean, doing exams where you have to read the exam paper and then consider what the issues are and apply it. To that extent, it works, and that's what you do in real life practice. You read a brief of evidence, then you consider what are the issues in it, and then you consider how to apply the law on it, and also legal research. Being able to do legal research is also very important, which I think we'll talk about in a moment as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, like in terms of theory, it doesn't quite line up with practice as well. Like sometimes it's not tied up in a nice little bow as well. So I think that's useful to say as well. On the other side of that, would you say there's any skills or habits you picked up from uni? I know you talked about communication, not necessarily being a uni skill, but is there something that from your uni experience has stuck with you as you've gone about practice?
Legal principles. Like Norton defence, for example, that actually came in handy. You know, you have to remember law school principles you learn from reading books. They're there for a reason. Understanding that there's elements of every offence that have to be satisfied, mens rea, actus reus, all that kind of stuff. Defences, mental illness defences, all that kind of stuff. That's obviously the fundamental building blocks that you learn in law school. But when it comes to practicality and applying it, you're doing it all the time in practice, and you're also communicating with a number of other stakeholders, like the court staff, your colleagues in the office, your client's family. So you're juggling all that, and then also at the same time, while preparing their cases, reviewing their brief of evidence, maintaining their confidence in you as a lawyer, you're also having to keep up with other demands in a law firm, such as initial consultations, you know, with the other clients that are coming through the door that also want representation in something that's a different area of criminal law. You know, and then you have to turn your mind to something else, and that's the hard part. Preparing for that as well, juggling all of that at the same time, you know, whilst also maintaining a healthy lifestyle. That is what they don't teach you also in any school or university. Maintaining a balance.
Would you say that that's the biggest learning curve you had transitioning into it, or is there anything else that? There
is, absolutely. Everyone's different. I stress out a lot at the start. The confidence comes through experience, is what I've learned. Then you rely on your own preparation and your abilities. Then everything else just flows in itself. And then, you know, then you realise I've got to also make sure I take care of myself as well. So I've got to make sure I hit the gym or I go for a walk. I've got to make sure I'm eating well as well, so I can stay focused. We forget the fact that just to maintain a high level of focus, you need to also eat. And a lot of the times, the newer lawyers, because you're so stressed out, you don't eat. And you think, I can work through this, it's fine. Because you're young and, you know, you've got the energy, but it does affect you. Not only in the long run, but in the short run as well, because you're just not going to be as well focused. But again, it depends on your personality. Some people are okay, they can still eat well, and, you know, even though they work under pressure really well, everyone's different. And you develop your own skills and you get better at it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really important point that you make there about balance. Kind of building off of that as well. I know personally I've had misconceptions about the law industry being quite intense. You know, it's non-stop whatsoever. Is there any misconceptions that you think in criminal law that you'd like to debunk that you think are commonly held?
Oh, criminal law, yeah, look, you're not going to die by a client. That's probably the first one I'd say. You know, it's when you speak to clients and you advise clients, whether it's a bikie, ex-bikie, or, you know, anyone else, you need to make sure you give them timely and honest advice. And also this goes back to communication. You're not going to go in, have a consultation with the client after reviewing the brief, because the brief evidence shows that it's a very strong police case. You have to be sensitive about it, and you have to be honest about it. So when a client comes in, I've read their brief of evidence and it's a strong police evidence case, I'm going to tell them the truth, but put it in very common sense, logical terms. That this is what this witness says, this is what that witness says, this is what this evidence says, this is what this evidence says, this is what we say. We're going to go to court. The judge is going to hear all that. What do you think is going to happen? So let them make that logical conclusion. Talk about the facts, give them your insight, but there's a way of telling them that you're going to lose if you follow this. Well, that's communication. So, and also managing your expectations, not over-promising, or promising but never delivering. So if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you're going to give advice, make sure it's accurate advice, because if something else completely different occurs, they're not going to like it. Whether they're a bikie or a non-bikie, they're still going to be annoyed at you. So look, it's safe. It's a very safe profession to be in, absolutely. Okay, honesty is the best policy, and I think that's probably the main one I'd probably say I want to debunk.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think managing expectations is probably, at least like in my personal experience, something that I think is so key in practicing, especially with client focus, but also
Absolutely.
Realizing that some of these clients are going through like some of the worst periods of their life, and like you have to like help them navigate that situation. So you're right, you have to be so sensitive, conscious about what's at stake for them. So.
And let them feel like they're heard. By the time they come to a criminal lawyer, they have felt like they're not being heard, right? They've been accused by everyone around them. So when they speak to you, let them be heard, hear them out, and be present, ask questions so they feel like that you actually do care. And then after listening to what they say, give them advice, and give them advice in layman's terms. Don't use legal terminology. Avoid that wherever you can. Just be straight up like you're talking to a mate. Explain it to them in a logical way. And all we're trying to do is put them in the best position. We're not promising particular outcomes. Never do that. But what we do offer is we're going to do everything we can to put you in the best position possible. Okay? So yeah.
I think that's a great approach. Something that we're particularly interested in, just specifically in criminal law, is the impact of the digital age and how that's changing. And I think a lot of our students, as well as ourselves, are quite curious about how that's intersecting with the area of criminal law and what changes are happening right now and what could be coming. So I'd be curious to ask, how have you found the digital landscape? So things like social media, smartphones, digital forensics have changed the type of matters that you're working on, and have there been any that in your time of practicing have come out that didn't exist before, and how's that been?
One particular one is AI generated sexual material, deepfake materials, for example. That's artificially generated materials falsely depicting or representing a real person. So sexually explicit deepfake materials generated by artificial intelligence are things like fake images, films, texts deriving or depicting a real person, but is in fact done to disseminate misinformation or disinformation to embarrass or exploit a person. So they're kinds of examples that the law is now keeping up with. It's now a criminal offence to produce or distribute sexually explicit deepfakes of a real person without their consent, and carries up to 3 years imprisonment as a maximum penalty. So particularly Division 15 capital C of the Crimes Act in New South Wales, offences are now amended to include these types of materials as a criminal offence, such as record intimate image without consent, distribute intimate images without consent, and threaten to record or distribute intimate images. So that's one. The other one is probably the rise in lawyers using AI to generate case authorities or submissions or even affidavits. That is now being addressed through even the Supreme Court practice notes now, where you have to disclose, there's an obligation on legal practitioners to disclose whether they actually used it, even if it's partially used, to disclose that. So yeah, they're probably the main two that I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are pretty pertinent areas as well. And I think you mentioned as well that the courts are trying to adapt. Like you said, the Supreme Court's come up with practice notes. There's already been kind of legislation against that. Do you think that the reform in that area is keeping up to pace, or is there anything you can see that you feel like the criminal law system could do better in to better address some of those new and novel criminal issues coming to light?
It's practice notes require, to disclose whether you use it, but some of the existing rules, like the solicitor's conduct rules, requires legal practitioners not to mislead the court. Breaches of that can result in a lot of disciplinary proceedings against a lawyer, including being struck off the roll. So if you're using AI cases and you're not doing your own research and you don't even know what that case is and you're just producing it before a court without making sure it's accurate as a lawyer and a professional, I think that's somewhat misleading the court. So, I think those kinds of issues are already kind of addressed through that avenue.
When it comes to the other side of things, like the deepfake sort of crime, those sort of AI-generated criminal offences, in your experience, I think something that people might be concerned about is just with the rampant rise in AI use, that these sort of offences are just occurring so often that it's kind of hard to avoid or actually convict. Have you found in practice that the law's actually been able to sort of capture these offences properly?
Which types of offences?
Or like these deepfake offences?
Look, it's hard. Someone has to kind of raise it. For example, a victim clearly knows that that's not them, right? But their face is on someone else's body. They'd have to raise it. And you have to get expert evidence as well. You can get expert evidence on it as well, and that's a separate area of expertise that would have to give evidence on. So once you prove it, obviously these new laws are there to protect the community, to prevent people from behaving this way.
There's probably a lot of shame associated with that as well, and that's where the communication comes into play. Just out of kind of general curiosity as well, in terms of recent cases, if you're allowed to speak to any, have there been any that you think are particularly relevant in terms of the digital age, or in terms of an area of interest in criminal law or criminal defence specifically that you would like to speak to?
I actually haven't come across at the moment, because these laws are just very, very fresh, by the way. These types of offences as yet, deepfakes offence, we haven't come across that yet. I imagine we'd probably start to at some stage. So in terms of that, no. There has been cases you probably hear in the news about a lawyer in Australia, multiple lawyers now, more than once happened, I think, are using AI-generated case authorities. That's actually incorrect. And they would ideally, I think, they'd be facing disciplinary proceedings. So nothing other than that, nothing else comes to mind. When it comes to expert evidence in certain cases, we usually have a panel of experts that we would brief and instruct on and try to obtain some insight about. But otherwise, no.
But just on that, would you say that there's any that have to do with maybe just the evolution of technology as far as evidence goes in proceedings? Have you noticed any sort of new things come up or any trends?
I think the only good thing that may have come, I don't know if some people would argue against it, but appearing in court via AVL link, for example, and giving submissions, or even in a bail application, now they have we have the regional AVL bail court, where in regional courts, people that are accused and are refused bail by police are brought before the court in regional courts. They have more limited access to a lawyer, can now appear, us in Sydney lawyers can appear, for example, for regional clients via AVL for a fresh custody bail application, which bridges a bit of that gap of access to justice to experienced lawyers and more criminal lawyers. So that's a good thing, but I don't think it's a good thing to let's now everyone start doing bail applications via AVL and sentence submissions via AVL, because advocacy it needs to be done in person. There's nuances you pick up in person when you're looking at a judicial officer and vice versa that are quite crucial in the way it's going. You may decide not to or make certain submissions based on those nuances when you're giving submissions on the fly, and that can make a big difference in the outcome that you end up getting for your client. And often those things you don't always pick up over an AVL screen.
For sure, I think it's always a balance with those kind of things as well.
Yeah.
Kind of moving forward in terms of advice to, let's say, future lawyers who want to get into criminal law as well. It's quite an evolving field, as you've kind of mentioned as well. Is there any ways where students can build up knowledge bases? How did you go about acquiring knowledge and learning on the job?
Look, firstly, this also ties up with the question you asked earlier, did law school assist? Yeah, it does assist in legal research, right, as well. But there's other things such as the Judicial Information Research System, JIRS. It's what the magistrates and judges use. There's statistics on cases, you can get comparative cases there's also the Public Defender's website. There's papers on there. It's awesome. I use it quite often. There's the criminalcpd.net.au. It's actually run by a Silk Mark Dennis senior counsel from Forbes, and a lot of criminal lawyers upload their papers on there on certain areas of law. It's great. I use it. I go there and I watch and I read it. There's New South Wales legislation. When you're looking at legislations, there's also obviously as OSLI that we use as well. I use OSLI for Commonwealth legislation, and I use New South Wales legislation for state legislation, New South Wales laws. So they're probably my go-tos.
Those are some great resources that I think our students can use. Certainly a few that I haven't heard of as well. So it's good to hear it from someone who uses them in actual practice. We spoke a bit earlier sort of about how within your own practice sort of the importance of having passion and sort of an eagerness to learn. I'm curious, and I think our students would love to sort of hear what kind of mindsets you think are really valuable for students to nurture in themselves, as they're entering the workforce, particularly in criminal defence law as well.
Mindset, it's very important to be positive. Now, in life experiences, you face certain hurdles, and some people become negative Nelly, others become positive. They see the positive side of it. There's always a negative side, and there's always a positive side to every situation you go through in life, no matter how bad it is. And the same kind of approach you take when you're advising clients. The last thing you want to do is advise a client by being negative Nelly and they run away from you. And it's also not good as a human being to be helping another human being by being negative to them as well. We're kind of also like counsellors, we really are. So you need a lot of patience, you really do. You need to be a bit of a people's person. You need to really care about people. Because if you don't care about people, or you don't have time for it, you don't have the patience for it, it's going to show in one form or another form. And that goes back to communication. It is communication skills. Communication is not how you eloquently or articulate things. It's not that. It's not just that. It's more importantly how you can manage people's expectations, adequately and frequently contacting your clients, maintaining contact with them. You don't want your client saying, "I never heard from my lawyer, and I don't know what's happening in my case." you need to make sure they know what's happening in case you're working as a team. And I reinforce that. I say, look, we're working as a team here. I need you to be into this just as much as I am, because I care about this, because it's your future. So communication skills is the most important thing to learn. And I just wish they taught that in university. So mindset, being positive, is very important. Work-life balance. Now, I mean, work-life balance, what does it really mean? To be honest, look, with me, I'm passionate in criminal law. I work pretty much every single day, and I always have. It's because I love what I do. So my work-life balance, I won't say, I have a bad work-life balance. I'll say I have a great work-life balance. I do what I like doing, and I make sure I take care of myself as well. I exercise, I eat right, I spend time with family and friends as well. So I think 3 things are very important. One is your work, your career, your passion. Other is family and friends, make time for, and the third is make time for yourself and make sure you look after yourself. And that's exercise and eat well. Because if you get all those 3 right, you're in a trajectory towards success, eventual success. I can't say how long it'll take, but it'll happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like that kind of balance as well. I think that's some things that a lot of students need to learn. In terms of, I guess, your own career path, wanting to dive back into how you found your passion, and you mentioned earlier, not everyone's that lucky to find something that they love doing, where it's not even work in some sense as well. So what advice would you give for students who are trying to find their way? Because a lot of students look at commercial law as like the big ticket, end goal, but don't really know what that actually is. So
what advice? My best advice is don't chase money. Chase your passion. That's the best advice you can ever get, honestly. If you chase money, and even if you get into a really high-paying job at the start, you're more likely to burn out. You won't last, and if you do, you're not really going to be happy unless you really love what you do. If you love what you do in that, great, that's exactly what you should be doing. But make sure first and foremost it's something you actually really are interested in doing. You want to do it, and do it for the right reasons, not for money, not for fame and fortune. Do it for passion. It's interesting. I do what I do because I honestly enjoy it. It's never a boring day in the office. It's fun, it's challenging, I'm not bored in my job. So, and that keeps me going. And eventually, all those things, money, fortune, everything, it just falls into place. It just takes time. So, do what you like doing.
I think that's some very good advice for people. I think, you're right, like they get distracted by the appeal of a lot of things, but you really, on your day-to-day, if you don't love what you're doing, it's going to feel tiring, it's going to burn you out eventually. So our last question is really just about what you're excited for in the future of criminal law. If there's anything that you're excited about as far as where the profession is heading, or if you've got anything like personal that you are looking forward to achieving.
A lot of my focus these days is also make sure we mentor the new generation of lawyers well, and focus on their development. And that's because it's so damn important for the future of this profession, especially criminal lawyers. A lot of the public perception of criminal lawyers is also already not that great. Dodgy criminal lawyer, going to try get someone off on a technicality. People don't understand what we really do. We are that. It's like, picture yourself having a sword and a shield. That's like when we're in court, knowledge of the law and your passion to help people is your sword and shield. You attack and you block. That's protecting a person's right, regardless of their age, sex, anything. Regardless of who they are, what they are, you're protecting a right that's shared across everybody. And that's very important. So making sure people understand, particularly the new lawyers, if you're into criminal law and you come here and you want an opportunity, my most important determination is, are you really passionate in this? Do you really want to do this? Because I like to be around people that share the same passion as me. Then it works. then I've got something to offer now. I can help you. I'll give you all the experience and knowledge and guidance in the world to help you succeed.
I think that's great advice as well in terms of sword and shield and bringing up newer lawyers as well. I think that's great. So
yeah, and that's where I'm excited for the profession to go towards. I want to see more good quality lawyers doing this for the right reasons.
Yeah, finding their passion as well. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's a very admirable goal to have, and definitely reassuring to hear as students going into it, knowing that our fellow students who might end up being in criminal defence are going to be able to have that mentorship going forward.
Yeah, and I think another issue is back then there wasn't much of a opportunity for criminal law in universities. These days it is increased. It definitely has increased. There's opportunities to get in touch with criminal law firms. I'm a mentor-mentee. I do mentorships with also Sydney University as well. We have interns coming in here from Western Sydney University as well. I also attend the, think we have a career panels at the University of New South Wales. I've been attending that yearly as well. So now there's a lot more opportunities for students to consider pathways other than just commercial law. And that's exciting.
You're right, that is very exciting, definitely.
That's our last question. So thank you so much for meeting with us. Thank you for telling us about your career journey and your career path as well. You offered a lot of, not just career advice, but life advice in general in terms of following your passion. So I think as students, we really appreciate that, and there's a lot to learn as well.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so thank you so much for listening to Insights by the UNSW Law Society. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any further episodes. Thank you.